I'm Delia and welcome to my Week 6 Hormone Replacement Therapy update. First off, oh my god, I cannot believe it has been 6 weeks since I started. Time has been flying by, and I think one of the major contributing factors to that is the fact that I am right now the happiest I remember ever being in my entire life. So I talked a lot even in week 1 about how I really immediately started to notice how my depression was on the decline and I was much more able to control the issues I've always had with anger in the past. But at this point it goes far beyond that. At that point I was thinking, oh, this is really cool, this is really nice. At this point, I'm thinking, oh my god, I had no idea that something as simple as having the correct hormone balance could play that large of a role in my overall happiness and mental health. I mean, the physical changes are definitely making me really happy too, and we'll get to those in a minute. But those changes still come very slowly. And while it's still really super exciting to see even the smallest changes towards the direction of where I want my body to be, those changes have been nowhere near large enough to account for the overwhelming difference I have found in how happy and satisfied I am with life right now. And I think you guys started picking up on that before I did. I noticed a lot of comments starting up on my videos about how much more vibrant and happy I seem than I used to. It seemed weird to me at first because I thought to myself, you know, I always kind of put on my happy face whenever I'm doing my videos. But then I started to notice, looking back through them, oh hey, I'm not having to put on my happy face anymore, I'm just happy. It's just kind of hard not to be though. Trust me, there are a lot of things in my life that could be going a lot better than they are right now. But it's like the voice that always used to be there saying, no, everything's falling apart, everything's going wrong, has been replaced by this different voice that's saying, things are gonna work out, they're gonna be okay, everything's good. Not to mention that my gender dysphoria has also been becoming significantly easier and easier to deal with. Some of that is due to physical changes, but once again, those physical changes so far have been really minor. I find that honestly though, most of it seems to be stemming from the fact that I'm just no longer spending anywhere near as much time thinking about the things that bother me about my body. I feel like that once again is probably just one of those things that has to deal with having my brain interact with the correct kind of hormonal environment. Don't get me wrong, being a girl with a penis is still not something I'm really happy about. I still very much have a hate-hate relationship with my genitals. But the amount of time each day I spend thinking about that has probably gone down by about like 75%. And if that's not something to smile about, I don't know what is. So now we're going to talk about physical changes and things like that. I'm going to start by backtracking a little bit to weeks 2 and 3. Maybe because this is something I really didn't even think about until a couple of people started asking me about it. So just in an overall sense, I've definitely been hungrier since starting transitioning. I think a lot of that probably has to do with the fact that my body's trying to do things like build fat reserves and butts and boobs and things like that. Or a butt and boob and things like that. Don't need more than one butt, that would be freaky. But I had some other trans women who have been through their hormone replacement therapy before ask me if I noticed any craving for pickles. It's something I usually think about more with pregnancy, and I really didn't think it was something that would show up from hormone replacement therapy. Well, let me tell you something, kosher dill spears are something that have always tickled my pickle. So I guess it would probably be really hard to notice if there was any type of craving because I like them anyway. The weird thing is, though, I actually haven't been eating very many pickles lately. What I did develop a bizarre craving for are pepperoncinis. It's starting to go away now, but from about the 2nd through the 4th week, I would frequently be eating like 5 pepperoncinis a day. Generally all in one sitting. I don't know if that had anything to do with the hormone replacement therapy or not, but it's weird enough that I wanted to make note of it, because I don't think most people eat that many pepperoncinis at once. But then again, I've always been weird, so maybe it's just me. Another thing I started to notice about the same time I made my last video and wanted to talk about but couldn't remember at the time was that my shower temperature preferences have changed noticeably. I've always been someone that loves like a scalding hot shower. If it's not borderline scalding hot, I feel cold and uncomfortable. At least I used to. Nowadays, if the shower water is too hot, it starts to make me feel tired. I don't get it, someone with some medical background, feel free to explain it for me, but I still like to start out kinda hot, but I very quickly turn that down to get it to a little lukewarm temperature that's much more comfortable for me now. And speaking of exhaustion, oh my god, The energy thing that people warned me about, it's true. Not so much finding that I have to catnap in the middle of the day anymore, but I get really tired really early in the evenings. The worst part of this is, it's not easy for me to fall asleep. I will be exhausted, but for some reason, all I can do is toss and turn for about an hour before I finally fade away into unconsciousness. And then I end up waking up at a time that feels way too early, and I am still exhausted. And I try, and try, and try to get back to sleep, but it just doesn't work. So I spend the first few hours of my day battling intense sleep inertia. And on top of that, I am feeling physically weak. You know, we're all told that muscle atrophy is something that starts to happen when you take away all the testosterone and flood the body with estrogen. But I'm not joking. I have lost like 10 pounds since I started hormone replacement therapy, and I guarantee you none of it has been from my midsection. If anything, I've noticed that I am starting to build up more fat. Thankfully, it hasn't really been around my midsection either, because I would not be happy about that personally. Definitely noticed some building up on my chest. There's been even more of it building up on my behind. I've always had the flattest of asses, so I'm not gonna say I got the booty yet. But I mean, by comparison, it's kinda crazy. I've also definitely been developing a layer of subcutaneous fat. That's a layer of fat that most people with an estrogen-based chemistry have in a much greater abundance than people with a testosterone-based chemistry. It's the main reason why it can be harder for women to achieve muscle definition than it is for men. And it's also the reason why the friendly people at the Plasma Center have been having a much harder time finding my veins lately. So with the amount of fat I'm building up, I am obviously having to lose muscle to have lost 10 pounds in 6 weeks. And I have noticed that my muscles are smaller, but more than anything else, they're just starting to feel really, really weak. And I should probably really start hitting the gym sometime soon. So my advice for you, if you have some time that you're going to be able to spend waiting to start hormone replacement therapy, you probably want to go ahead and start hitting the weights now. Because I guarantee you, you're going to lose a lot of muscle and strength on hormone replacement therapy, and it's going to be much harder to get it back afterwards. Now that's probably going to be different for a lot of people watching this video. I know I'm probably a little bit weird in the fact that I would like to have a fit, muscular, bikini, or figure competitor type physique one day. But trust me, I don't think anyone wants their arms to get tired just from washing their hair. And no, I'm not exaggerating. So onto the topic that's probably the reason you're watching this, boobs! So it's been really easy for me to kind of track things in regards to my boobs because I've never had prominent pectoral muscles or a lot of fat deposits on my chest. So it's been pretty easy to actually see my ribs through that part of my body, so it was also very easy to notice when things started taking shape there. This is probably the most agonizingly slow part of everything. Honestly, for the most part, it really hasn't been anything to write home about. This stuff all happens at different rates for different people, but the fat that's been building up honestly has taken a shape that looks more like pecs for the most part. So if you're not a scrawny rump like I've always been, you may not really notice much of anything at all. Until you get up to a certain point and you also start to have breast tissue developing on top of it to help things out, the shape really looks more like pecs than it does anything else. Because what you can tell it's fat is just the consistency of it, and if you're not used to having pecs, the fact that it's there. But 3 weeks ago, literally the very night after I recorded my last hormone replacement therapy update, my tits decided to announce their arrival with a lovely dose of nipple pain. So when it first started, it kind of went on for about 2 days. It wasn't any type of constant pain, just if anything touched my nipples, brushed against them, put any kind of pressure on them at all, it hurt like hell. And I never noticed how many times a day I accidentally brush against or put pressure on my nipples. The third day, there was a little bit of relief. After that, it came back with a vengeance, and it's been here ever since. So this is your #1 indicator that breast tissue is actually starting to develop. Okay, so I had no idea going into this how this process was going to shape out. And I'm still very much in the dark about where it's going to go from here. So far, I have noticed that the nipples themselves as well as the areola are actually starting to get larger. The areola is taking more of a circular shape as opposed to in the past where mine personally have always been very kind of oval shaped. And in addition to that, the areolas themselves have actually kind of been projecting a little bit from the surrounding area, almost as though they're swollen or something. That started pretty right away, but more recently I've also been noticing that there's this kind of almost perfectly round area around the entire complex that's also been swelling out a little bit from the rest of the chest behind it. And it doesn't like being messed with, but if you feel the area, you can actually feel the breast tissue that's starting to develop there. So yay, there are boobs! And they're tiny, but I'm still celebrating because it's nice to actually have them there. They're not as noticeable from the front. They're definitely more noticeable from the front if you do this, but more than anything else, they're noticeable from the side. You can actually definitely see where there's kind of this downward slope that, it's like a boob shape. It's like probably not even a half of an A cup, but I will take what I can get for right now. Now's where we get to the TMI section. This is where we talk about things that some people might not want to hear about, but which are interesting for scientific purposes. And if you're watching a transgender woman chronicling her transition, you're probably interested for scientific purposes. That being said, if you don't want to hear stuff about genitals and bodily fluids and things like that, this is where you skip ahead. Okay, so let's talk turkey about nethers for a second. Start with, my testicles have been shrinking. This makes me happy and it also makes tucking easier. It's also pretty early on that I noticed the frequency of my erections was on a sharp decline, as well as my overall sexual arousal. At this point, my libido is essentially non-existent. Maybe once a week, I will find myself kind of horny. And that's the only time. That may sound depressing for some people, but it doesn't really faze me or bother me. I don't really think of it any one way or the other. That being said, in situations where I am aroused, everything functions pretty much exactly the way it always has. With one key difference: every erogenous zone of my body is significantly more sensitive right now than it used to be. So if you like sex, there's something to look forward to. One other change I've noticed in just the past week or so is the fact that I am starting to sweat significantly less, especially in my underarm area. And the sweat itself smells much different now. Hey, this is the TMI section. You had your chance to turn around, you should have taken it. Well, let's be honest for a second. I'm not kidding myself. I know I'm this kind of trashy Kesha-esque thing. And yes, there are many days when I forget to put on my deodorant. In the past, that would have meant something. Now, not so much. And on that incredibly awkward note, I guess that pretty much wraps this up. I hope this has been helpful, maybe a little bit entertaining, and above all else, educational for you. As always, feel free to leave any questions, thoughts, or anything that you'd like to see in future episodes in the comments below. At this point, I want to give a special shout out to all of my subscribers, but especially a huge thanks to my patrons on patreon.com. You guys are what makes this channel possible, so thank you. If you're not a patron yet and you want to find out more, just go to www.patreon.com/DeliaMelody. As always, thank you so very much for watching, and until next time, be yourself.